This screencast is to support the teaching of this lesson, which is Lesson 5 from Language to Go Pre-Intermediate. That's G. Cunningham and S. Mohammed as the authors, and the publisher is Longman. So here's the student's book page, and you're going to need a few other things. There's a single page of teacher's book notes with all the answers and a few tips. You've got a grammar reference from the back of the student's book. It's here for Lesson 5, but all of the grammar references for all of the lessons from Language to Go can be found in your Teams area under Files. It has a listening activity in it, so here you can see Lesson 5 continues up here. And you'll find all the recording scripts are in one document in your area on Teams. The audio file Donna or I will send to you in the email. Language to Go also has a set of extra control practice activities for each lesson. Again, you'll find all of those in one file under your team under Files, but here is the control practice exercises for this lesson in case you're looking for something extra. Okay, so the lesson topic is a Scottish wedding, or weddings in general. There is a skills focus in that there's a listening in this particular lesson, and the grammar that is to be practiced is the use of should to give advice and the use of imperatives also to give advice. And it builds up into a nice speaking task where they're talking about weddings in their country and giving advice to someone coming to their country. So I'm hopeful that this is a topic that all students can relate to. So the first part is the vocabulary and getting students into the topic, basically. The teacher's book suggests a couple of things, maybe putting a map of the UK on the board or on a slide and eliciting the countries and maybe the capitals, and then moving on to raise interest in Scotland. So saying to the students, think about 5 things you know about Scotland. Okay, elicit an example and then give the students time to think, and then say, right, talk together. What 5 things do you know about Scotland? And then you could say, okay, we're going to listen to someone having a wedding in Scotland. But first of all, let's look at some vocabulary. Now, the vocabulary is in the box here, okay. You could beef it up a little bit and add some difficulty by adding maybe bouquet, photographer. I think registry office is important because we're going to be looking at a church wedding situation here, but of course a lot of people in the UK do get married in a registry office. So I'd add to the vocabulary there. So different approaches with vocabulary teaching. If you think that your students don't know the vocabulary, then you'll need to convey the meaning through pictures perhaps and elicit or tell them the words. However, if you think that they might know some of this vocabulary, and I think at pre-intermediate level, our students living here in the UK largely, they're going to know some of it, I would adopt a test, teach, test approach. Okay? So first off, you want a diagnostic test, a task, to find out what they know. So this could be various things. I think here it lends itself to perhaps showing them a picture of the different people in a wedding and putting the words down the side and saying to them, okay, can you match the words with the picture? Don't worry if you don't know the words, but I want to find out what you know. Okay, so try to match the words with the pictures. They could do that alone first, and then peer check. You could say, talk together, I'll listen, hear what they have to say, hear where the problem areas might lie, or whether maybe they just do know it and you can move on quite quickly. So some kind of matching task or tasks to get across the vocabulary and to see what they know. Then you can come in with the teach stage, and that is checking the answers to the task and focusing more on the ones that they have had difficulty with. They may have had difficulty with the meaning, they've probably had difficulty with the pronunciation, so you might have some drilling going on there. So that's the teach stage in the middle, focusing on meaning, form and pronunciation. The form is basically the spelling and the fact they're all nouns, so not a big deal. So mainly meaning and pronunciation. And then you need the final test, okay? Another activity to see if the students have really got it, okay? You could use this gap fill here if you like, that's fine. Or you could create some sentences of your own, or you could have a fun quiz perhaps that you might make on Wordwall or Quizlet, where the students could be, maybe you have a definition and the students have to remember the word. It could even be a team game where you have different questions for different teams. Okay, so a test, teach, test format would be a good idea, I think. Alright, so we have a listening task here. That's a receptive skill. So we're looking at receptive skills procedure. Alright, so what can we do to raise interest and background knowledge before they listen? Do we need to pre-teach any vocabulary before they listen? The blocking vocabulary that there might be in this task and in the text. And then hopefully there'll be a simple first task the first time they listen, and then a more complex second task. Okay, so let's just go back through those stages. So raising interest, we've already raised interest in the idea of weddings, so that's great. So then we just need to set the scene for the listening. So I would say, okay, you're going to listen to a radio show. It's on American radio, but they are talking about weddings. Okay, that's as much as you need to set the scene, really. And then you might pre-teach some vocabulary. So have a look at the tasks. So here, these initial questions, and here, these questions here, and think, right, which words are they going to need to know in order to be able to do those tasks? You can look back at the recording script, which I showed you earlier in that document that's in your files in your team. And look at the tape script, look at the recording, and pick out the words to pre-teach. I don't think there's a whole lot that needs doing here, but the word kilt is jumping out at me. I think they need to know that. And I think the word wedding list as well is necessary. Both of those words are in the questions, but of course they're in the listening as well. So probably just those two words, because reception was dealt with in the first stage. Okay. But see if there's anything else you might need to deal with. So you've set the scene, you've pre-taught the vocabulary, then you can say, right, I want you to listen. Set the task before they listen, give them a reason for listening to encourage the skills that we're trying to encourage. And these two questions should work fine for the first task. So set the task, play the audio all the way through without stopping, stop, and then say, okay, check together, check with your partner if you're in the classroom, or in the online environment you can say, check together, talk together, and I will listen, and then come in for class feedback. Then, same procedure with this second more complex task. Okay, set the task, let them listen. Because it's more complex, you might need to chunk the task, i.e. just pause perhaps halfway through just to give them time to process. And then continue, and then again check in pairs or check as a group before coming in and checking as a class. You could maybe round it off with something. There's nothing here in the book, but maybe they could talk together. Would you like to go to this Scottish wedding? Would you be excited to go to this wedding? Something like that, just to round it off a little bit before we move on. All right, and here we are with the grammar focus. So we're focusing on should and the imperative form. Not too complex for pre-intermediate, so I would presume that they've met this before, but maybe underuse both of these two grammatical structures. So as always, when we're looking at a grammar focus, we're thinking, how involved are the learners? I mean, here they've got a couple of gaps to fill, but that's about it really. So I'd be thinking, well, what can I do to engage the learners? There's a few things you can do. You've got to start with examples first. So I might take some examples with should, and then maybe jumble up the words and put those jumbled up sentences on a slide or on a handout, and first see if the students can put them in the right order, and that will generate the examples. Then you'll want to look at the meaning, and I think this is pretty good actually as a way of focusing on the meaning of should. So you could do this activity and then say, right, so in the jumbled sentences you had should, and that means the same thing as it's a good idea to do something, and shouldn't, it's not a good idea to do something. Yeah. Same sort of thing with the imperatives, really. You could try to elicit some imperatives from them. So you could say, what's another way to say you should enjoy yourself? What's another way to say you shouldn't dance first? And try to elicit the imperatives from there. Then you've got the examples, and then I think you need to do a little bit of work with meaning there. Say, stand up, sit down. Does that sound polite? No. So when you're using imperatives, you need to use a polite intonation. So enjoy yourself. Don't dance first. Yep, so there's some drilling necessary here as well. The form needs to be looked at. I would try to elicit from the examples. So we use should. Where is it here? Here, you use should, and what comes afterwards? Is it to check or just check? It's just check. So it's just should plus the base verb, the infinitive, without to. Elicit the negative, and maybe elicit the question form as well. Okay, so if you haven't already done some drilling when you were dealing with meaning, then now would be the time to do it. So meaning first, perhaps do your pronunciation at the same stage, then look at the form, and then if you haven't dealt with pronunciation, you could do it then. Okay, but think about how you're going to engage the students in this stage. It's time for practice. Let's see if they can manipulate the forms. Let's see if they can do a simple practice that just has one correct answer, so controlled practice. Nothing wrong with this gap fill. If you fancy it, you could use that, and they could practice reading out the dialogues afterwards. I'm not sure there's a whole lot of value in reading aloud. It doesn't really do anything for pronunciation, but it might solidify the form, so you could do that part. Or if you want to make your own controlled practice task, you could have simple sentences in a gap fill, or some correct, incorrect sentences, things like that, okay? Remember, there are also additional controlled practice tasks in the additional grammar practice for this lesson, and that's in a document in files in your team. All right, well, here's the fun bit. So I think it would be great to give this as much time as possible. We want them talking about weddings, and I think this is a nice setup here, giving advice to a Scottish friend coming to a wedding in your country. All right, so in any good speaking activity, you want to set the idea for the speaking activity, and then you want to scaffold it, and that's a way of staging it. All right, so you want to make sure that they've got the vocabulary they need. I think we've done that. They've got the grammar they need. I think we've done that. Okay, so then you need to give them preparation time. So set the task, maybe give an example about someone coming to a wedding somewhere that you have been. Okay, you could model the task yourself, and then you can say, right, I want you to talk about someone coming to a wedding, giving advice to someone coming to a wedding in your country. And give them time to prepare. So say, well, I'm going to give you 5 minutes to write some sentences and think about what you're going to say. And you can point out these things here and any other things you might want to add. And give them the preparation time. Be available if they need any vocabulary. Give them a time limit and give them a time check. 1 more minute. And then stop and decide how you're going to group them to maximize the speaking time for everyone. I would suggest small groups, maybe groups of 3, for them to talk together about giving advice for their own countries. Okay. In the classroom, I often just put a chair in the middle and say, right, here is, Bob, and he's coming to the wedding. So talk to Bob and give him the advice. So you can do little things like that. But you want to maximize the speaking time for everyone. It's freer speaking, so you don't want to correct on the spot, but you do want to do some correction later. So listen in to what they're saying and make notes, and maybe even make a Word document of the correct and incorrect things that you hear. And then when you're ready to finish the activity, you can say, okay, so what's some interesting things that you learnt from your partners? Feedback on ideas first, and then feedback on accuracy. So bring up that Word document, or write on the board, or put in the chat box, or say out loud the sentences that were correct, not correct, and get the students to focus on correcting them. I think it should be an interesting topic for the students, and we might learn quite a lot of new things. So I hope it's enjoyable. Thank you.